It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Priscilla Simon.
Hey folks, it's your 420 Radio News for Monday, August 4th, 2014. In the first 2 weeks since DC's marijuana decriminalization law took effect, the Metropolitan Police Department has written 27 civil citations for violations, multiple outlets reported last week. But just as many arrests have been made for marijuana-related crimes not affected by the new law. The law, which says that anyone caught with possession of an ounce or less of marijuana will receive a $25 fine, was passed as a way to reduce the amount of marijuana-related arrests in D.C. The staggering statistics show a huge racial disparity in marijuana-related arrests in D.C., with persons of color accounting for more than 90% of all arrests. Meanwhile, D.C. Cannabis Campaign launched a ballot initiative to legalize marijuana in the district. The group turned in more than 57,000 signatures, more than twice the amount needed to get on the ballot for the November general election last month, and they expect the D.C. Board of Elections to announce this week if their initiative will indeed be on the ballot.
Well, good news coming out of D.C. there. 2 weeks isn't a really long time to be able to set any trends or be able to detect any trends in this, but 27 violations, $25 each. So what do they make? $700, $675, something like that. The $25 fine is the lowest fine in the nation. As far as arrests for crimes not affected by the new law, the arrest would have to be, I believe, possession over an ounce or possession with intent to sell or selling marijuana, or perhaps growing marijuana as well. As for this D.C. cannabis campaign trying to get marijuana legalization passed in Washington, D.C., they've got enough signatures. It's more than likely that they're going to be on the ballot as far as the D.C. Board of Elections is concerned. But as far as the federal Congress is concerned, that's another story. Remember, everything that happens in the Washington, D.C. federal district has ultimate veto authority by the federal Congress, and they can pull all sorts of shenanigans as far as funding. They can say things like, well, you can spend no money to implement your legalization law, or you can spend no money to count the votes, is what they did with the medical marijuana law. It'll be interesting to see how Congress reacts to this. I can't imagine that they're just going to sit by and watch marijuana be legalized right there in Washington, D.C., when you got so many of these red state and Tea Partier and even Blue Dog Democrats from the Midwest and the South that really need to have that strong, tough on drugs campaign approach. So it's going to be very interesting, and I think Washington, D.C., how it goes down can tell us a lot about how marijuana legalization is going to play out nationwide.
True. For growers who wish to farm legal cannabis on Washington's Vashon Island, there may be no legal way for a state-approved marijuana producer to move product across the Puget Sound. Since no roads connect Vashon to the mainland, marijuana growers will have to move their product by air or sea, both regulated by federal agencies, which still consider marijuana to be illegal. For Scott Durkee and the 13 other growers seeking licenses on Vashon, some of whom have already invested thousands of dollars into their business, this poses a complication, especially given there's only 3 retail shops planned for the island. Quote, "We're not going to sell it all on Vashon," said Durkee, an island resident. Quote, "We're stoners, but we're not that much of stoners," end quote. Vashon Island could be a pot grower's utopia. At 37 square miles, it's larger than Manhattan, but with less than 1% of the population. This isolated rural farming locale, combined with high voter approval of legalized marijuana, makes the island attractive real estate for outdoor growers. Modern Farmer dubbed Vashon Weed Island last year.
Yeah, Weed Island it is. And, there's a similar problem they've got in Hawaii as well. When it goes all the way back to medical, you're going to grow on one island. How are you going to get it out to the other island? And you got to fly or you got to take a boat. And all of that is, federal territory as far as the law is concerned. It just goes to show that, we've already thought of the banking and all of the other federal areas, taxes, where it being legal in a state crosses these federal barriers that we have to deal with. And this is just another one of them, dealing with places that are either going to have some sort of flight or some sort of boat to transport from the state to just even other parts of the state. Washington State's going to have this problem. Hawaii's going to have this problem. I imagine there could be, similar if you're growing on Catalina Island in California or some of the East Coast states that have some of these islands that are reachable only Martha's Vineyard, right? Air or sea. So anyway, Nantucket Island, I guess it would be. But anyway, interesting problem that we're going to have to solve here, and maybe only federal legalization can solve that.
Life in Cheyenne County, Kansas is more about cows than cannabis. But now this part of the Old West is on the front line of marijuana's new frontier. Pot is legal in nearby Colorado, but when it leaves the state, it often travels across Kansas' remote highway. A recent study found that nearly half of all marijuana purchases in Colorado are made by out-of-state visitors. Under federal law, that marijuana has to remain within Colorado's borders. In 2013, the federal Rocky Mountain high-intensity drug trafficking areas calculated 288 cars smuggling Colorado marijuana beyond state lines. That may not seem like much, but experts estimate that they are only catching about 10%, meaning 90% of illegal trafficking is going unnoticed. We've documented 40 different states that it's gone to, said Tom Gorman, the agency's director. On patrol, arrest is not the only answer in a cash-strapped county of fewer than 3,000. Sometimes it's more beneficial to let the sheriff confiscate the small amount of marijuana found if they don't pose a threat, according to the county sheriff.
Yeah, Cheyenne County, Kansas's problem isn't that Colorado legalized, it's that Kansas still prohibits. And this is the thing that these nearby states are going to have to realize, is that states have the right to do what they will with weed, and it's a weed. And lots of people like it, and they're going to traffic it. And there's nothing a state could do. I mean, I imagine some of these states might ask Colorado to set up those roadside, toll plazas like you have in California. When you go to California and you stop by and they say, "You got any fruits or vegetables on you?" No, and then they wave you through. Is that what they want us to do to make sure the weed doesn't get out? Because here's the problem I've got with all of this belly aching from these nearby states about Colorado marijuana. They say they're only catching 10%. 90% of it's getting through. So if 90% of it's getting through, tell me what terrible thing has happened aside from people violating your prohibition, saying that you said no and they went and did it anyway. Are you seeing more traffic fatalities? Are you seeing more kids going psychotic? Are you seeing more adults not going to work? Right? What is the harm here? The fact
they're just stepping on their grass.
You're just stepping on their grass. That's what they've got the problem with, is get off my damn lawn, kids. That's what they've got the problem with. They can't show that there's been any actual harm, and they're actually harming their own taxpayers by continuing to spend money in this futile attempt to try to stop the weed. Use that tax money to help people instead of trying to hurt people.
Yeah. A California man faces controlled substance and child endangerment charges after a marijuana cooking process allegedly set his apartment on fire. Central Marin Police said Brian Holland, 29, was attempting to convert marijuana into a wax form late Saturday when butane used for the process ignited from being too close to the heater pilot light. Holland was taken to a local hospital to be treated for a minor burn on his arm suffered in the fire. Holland's two children, 2 and 4, were asleep in a bedroom adjacent to the living room where the fire started, but were not hurt. And Holland's mother was also in the apartment, authorities said. Upon being released, Holland was booked at Marin County Jail on 2 counts of child endangerment and 1 count of manufacturing a controlled substance. The fire had been put out by residents with a fire extinguisher before responders arrived, leaving only a burn mark on the living room carpet, fire officials said. Police reportedly seized more than 2 pounds of marijuana, 24 cans of butane, and other materials used for the conversion process.
All right, folks. Those of you in Oregon who keep questioning me about New Approach Oregon's ban on homemade marijuana extraction, here you go. This is why it's in there. This is the exact kind of story that people don't want to see in the headlines that are going to make people nervous about legalization of marijuana. Now, I've been reading up a lot on this, and some people that I deeply respect in the concentrates industry, and one of them is a friend named Daniel DeSalle, and he made a really good point about, he made a lot of really good points about medical users and people who do it safely outside where it's ventilated, or people that are using closed loop extraction systems, very, very understandable. And he came up with what I thought was a novel regulatory idea. And that is, don't make the penalty for illegal manufacture of hash, or don't ban hash making. Ban the indoor discharge of butane. Right? Just ban the indoor use of flammable solvents, butane, propane, hexane, whatever it might be. Because that's really what we're afraid of. People discharging these flammable gases inside their homes where they might cause explosions. He wouldn't even have to be making hash. Someone just sitting around discharging butane. That's the crime. So now the hash making is why people are doing that. But the real danger here is the explosive gas. So let's make discharging explosive gases indoors illegal, instead of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and having it so patients can't manufacture, a potent concentrate that they really need.
What if a pot-related business wants a, quote, marijuana mullet? Business up front and party in the back. This is the case at Three Kings Dab Supply Shop in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. In the past couple of months, the small business has gotten into some hot water for allowing customers to smoke pot on the back patio. According to a city ordinance, Wheat Ridge prohibits businesses from allowing customers to consume marijuana on the property. On June 17th, the owners were issued a citation. On July 10th, the owners were served a cease and desist letter. Attorney Robert Corey, who is representing Three Kings Dab Supply, says the back patio is a private area and only those invited to hang out there by the owners are allowed. Quote, that is our right, and we are going to continue to exercise our rights, Corey said. Quote, outdoor smoking in private places on private property is allowed under Amendment 64, and it's allowed under any Wheat Ridge ordinance, end quote.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. People are just going to have to get used to the fact that they're going to have to tolerate the smell of marijuana to some extent. We do have these rights to gather, to peaceably assemble. If cigar smokers can gather, if beer drinkers can gather, we should be able to gather. But my favorite part of this story, I love the term marijuana mullet. That's one of my favorite terms ever.
Yeah, it's really good.
All right, well, speaking of business up front, we finished the business. Time for the party in the back. It's 4:20 in Denver, Colorado. Priscilla Simon has some studying to do, I understand. We'll see you, Priscilla. When we come back, we go behind the headlines and take a look at 2 competing marijuana ads from the New York Times and a bonus ad from Florida. It's the Russ Belville Show.
420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization.
What the authorities should do is decriminalize pot use. You want to do it in your house, not bother anyone? Fine. Go outside with a joint or a pipe, you pay a fine.
A majority of voters support changing failed marijuana laws, legalization and decriminalization.